Today we're going to be talking about how to protect children in the ever-evolving online digital world. And unfortunately, the exploitation of kids today online is at an all-time high. I am so pleased to have Dr. Jill Manning with me today. Jill is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She is also an internet safety expert, a former Enough is Enough board member, and a wonderful friend of mine. Jill, welcome.
Thank you. It's a treat to be here, Donna.
Jill, you're also a mother of two beautiful children.
I have a tween and a teen, so I am full-fledged official in the parenting realm of the very issues that we're going to talk about today.
That's right. So you're dealing with everything we're going to be talking about firsthand in real time. And so we really appreciate that. And I'm a grandmother of four, so I have a little bit of a different perspective, but we've both been at this a long time. We were both in the beginning of these issues as they started at the advent of the internet. And things have just continued to evolve. The internet's continued to evolve. The risk to kids have continued to evolve. And so we're going to first talk about the risk to kids in this digital world. And then we're going to end with a lot of hope, because there are ways to protect your kids and to prevent them from being exposed to a lot of the harms that are online today. So we're first going to start, Jill, with this very alarming Surgeon General warning that basically said that there are profound risks to children on social media. What did you think of that report?
I'm glad you're starting with that report because it's hot off the press. It's recent. It's coming from the lead physician of our country, and it's speaking with authority and with a lot of excellent research backing it up that the risks are real and that the harms are pervasive and that this is really part and parcel with the mental health crisis that we're seeing in our country.
When I began back in 1994, I always began with this line: the technology is neutral. It can be used for good or for evil. But now we're finding social media platforms are actually programming their algorithms to keep everyone, including kids, hooked on these platforms. And that's a whole different ballgame than where we started in the beginning of the internet in the 90s, where bad actors like pornographers and sexual predators and traffickers were exploiting the internet, which was at that time neutral. Now we're seeing big tech itself is exploiting the technology for their own gain and profit.
Yes, it's powerful technology, and our lives benefit from this technology every day, including our youth. And like any powerful resource, it takes responsibility and wisdom to manage it in a way that we optimize the good and minimize the harm or eliminate the harm as much as possible. And we both know, Donna, that there is a lot that can be done that to protect our youth. And I take the role of being a safeguard for youth very seriously. And I want to invite anyone listening to consider how they can be a safeguard as well and take some of these warnings very seriously and into action. And our children, they need to know how to navigate the digital world responsibly. But that takes guidance and safeguarding with adults. They can't do that on their own. So it's our responsibility to work together to help them, guide them, and also model what this looks like, what it means to be a responsible digital citizen, and how to, as I said, leverage and maximize the good and minimize or eliminate the harm.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so we know that technology's here to stay, the internet's here to stay. You certainly cannot just shut it off and pretend that the internet is going to go away. It's not. In fact, kids' online lives have completely merged with their offline lives. And I want to just share a few statistics that came out in this report. And that is that 95% of youth ages 13 to 17 report using social media, and a third of those said that they're using it almost constantly. And that 40% of 8 to 12-year-olds are using social media. And what's alarming about that is that social media platforms have an age limit. and that is 13 and over. The problem with this is that there's no age verification. So all an 8-year-old has to do is simply change their birthday and they can get on these platforms. Now, at Enough is Enough, we have been trying to get these social media companies to use technology that is readily available right now to verify the age, to make sure that kids are actually of the right age to get on these platforms, but they're not doing that. And that's one of the things we're trying to change in Congress, to require that age verification limit. Let's talk about some of the findings as well as on this report. The report said that there were 90,000 pro-eating disorder accounts on Instagram. And kids as young as 9 to 10 are following 3 or more of these. Jill, can you cover some of what these harms are as far as the mental health risk involved, sleeping disorders, anxiety, depression, suicide? Speak to this from your vantage point.
Well, there are many harms. There are benefits, but the harms, when you read the Surgeon General report, they're outweighing many of the benefits. And so we need to be aware of those as parents and leaders. And I want to make a distinction. The report was for social media specifically, but you and I both know, most parents know, even if you're not on a social media platform, you may be on YouTube or Googling something, social media content is coming your way, because many of the harms listed and that we know about really apply to the internet generally. So we know that youth that are regularly on these platforms and online have a higher risk of depression and anxiety. And we actually know that it's also predictive of youth believing they have less quality of life for youth that are online 3 or more hours a day, which is concerning. Body image issues, lower self-esteem. Sleep is an issue because if there's not good limits and discipline in the home around when and how internet-enabled devices are used, this is interrupting sleep. And sleep is key for development. So we've had pediatricians speaking out about this for many years, that we need devices out of bedrooms, especially when it's nighttime, for sleep. Mm-hmm. Also bullying. If you've had a young person in your life or know of one, you know very well that cyberbullying is not limited to just online. When someone's being cyberbullied, they're also being bullied offline, because the discussion and social landscape changes. When something's circulating and gone viral in a hateful or mean way towards someone, that's also affecting offline life as well. So all of those are key risks. I also am particularly troubled about suicidality. We know that youth that spend a lot of time online, they get more disconnected from real life, and that there's heightened suicidality risk when youth are on these platforms for extended periods of time. There's a lot of, I realize, complex reasons why. I'm not suggesting internet is causing suicidality in youth, but many of the factors that would lead a young person to be spending more and more time online and more disconnected from friends or family offline, they overlap with some of the risk factors for suicidal ideation.
Yeah, very, very good points, Jill. Thank you so much. Let's talk a little bit about the impact on the brain. Now, we both know that the brain, especially the prefrontal cortex, is not fully developed until now they're saying about 25 years old, which is why God gave kids parents, right? They need our guidance. They need our experience and expertise with life, and they also need our adult reasoning brain to help guide them. They're just getting bombarded with information overload. And how is this impacting these young developing brains?
They are. And it's an unfair setup, because at the very time of life where we need the most protection for a brain that's highly sensitive to rewards and peer pressure, the opinions of others, and just risk taking generally. This is the very time we need to safeguard the most. And so taking action is really key. We know that teens that spend 3 or more hours a day online, it doubles their risk for poor mental health outcomes.
I remember very well, I was 10 years into being involved in internet safety when social media was first introduced. There was Facebook and there was MySpace. And these platforms, they were developed for college aged and older. And what is very concerning to me, the platforms have not changed. They are still set up that way. And yet, the social media platforms have allowed younger and younger users to get on. So they went from an age limit of 18 in the early days to 13. And Instagram recently wanted to go younger than that. And Enough is Enough and others fought this very hard. So the Instagram for Kids was paused. But I just want to introduce this whole idea of wait until 8. And that is wait until kids are at least in the 8th grade to give them a smartphone. A smartphone's different than a phone. You can get a phone where they can call mom and dad or a grandparent. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we need to have some improved standards about age limits, age verification, and really what we're doing when we're introducing these at young ages. So just like we have research and experience and sadly a lot of loss that's gone into saying we're going to have the age of 16 be the age when youth can get a driver's license, and we're going to have certain ages when they can start purchasing and consuming alcohol or cigarettes, vaping, all of these things. And those regulations and laws come into being because we learn the hard way, sadly, that we lose too many people. There's lives at risk, and the harms are great if we don't regulate and be responsible about when things are introduced. I feel the same way about many of these platforms online. The problem is we need all stakeholders working together. The schools need to be supporting those kinds of standards. You know, when you send a child to school, in most schools, not all, depending on the program and curriculum, the school's introducing and encouraging some of these platforms as part of their projects and schoolwork. Even when you go to some places of worship, you'll have youth groups that are encouraging this, or sporting programs that require a young person to be on social media to keep in contact with the team or to get the coach's messages. So much of the internet is boundaryless. I'm encouraged by the Surgeon General's report and some of the discussions we've seen in the last couple of years, especially. So I really would plead with everyone to see how they can be part of the solution, whether you're a coach, a teacher, a parent, a grandparent, a youth group leader, whatever corner of society you stand. This needs all hands on deck.
That's going to lead us into really one of the main reasons I got into this at the advent of the internet in 1994, and that was the explosion of online pornography. And so let's talk a little bit about pornography. What began in the 90s, what I used to call black market pornography that you couldn't find in a triple X rated bookstore then or even now, has become mainstream and is now the new normal. So here are a few statistics. Kids under the age of 14 represent 58% of the porn use by minor children. Kids will oftentimes mimic and imitate what they see, and they become very sexualized by all of this pornographic content. We're keeping this conversation to online, but it's in lyrics, it's on television, in video games, it's really everywhere. So I want to talk about that, but I want to make a very important point, and that is the majority of this content is illegal under federal obscenity laws. These obscenity laws have not been prosecuted, and Enough is Enough, we have had an active campaign, and you can go to enough.org to sign, to get the Department of Justice to start enforcing these laws. They have not done this since George Bush was president. And so you mentioned this unregulated social experiment of pornography and how it has impacted our youth. Jill, I know you see this, you mostly treat adults in your practice, but many of these adults were exposed to this content and got hooked and addicted at a young age, didn't they?
They did. In fact, I do not know of an adult that I've seen in treatment that was not introduced at a young age. What we see is that this is introduced 7, 8, 9 time frame, and then it develops. They're then experimenting, and it's picking up speed, and we have a rise in the number of people that by the time they're graduating from high school are well on their way into compulsive sexual behaviors. And it is a pollutant and toxin to healthy psychosocial development, physical development. It changes the brain. We can't ignore it. And one of my biggest concerns is how normalized sexual violence and these behaviors are. It's become normal for teens in our culture to receive pictures of genitalia, indecent exposure, sexual harassment. All of those things have become so normalized that our teens don't even spot them as problematic. Even if they feel uncomfortable, they think
Right.
it's uncomfortable because there's something wrong with them, not because there's something wrong with it. Right? And they'll internalize that
Right.
shame as,
Right.
oh, I need to get with the program. I'm not cool enough. I don't belong. What's wrong with me? And I want to really name that and call it
Mhm.
out. Pornography is abnormal. We as humans are designed to be relational with people, not pixels. And
Right. That's a
sexual
great.
crimes have become so normalized that even a lot of adults don't see it, like you just named. When you speak out, and I've been present when you've spoken out on this, and people are shocked at how much of this is illegal. They don't understand it because it's been so baked into the fabric of our culture, we're no longer even calling it out.
Right. And that's such an interesting point. We there have been so many studies on the fact that kids consider sexting, which is sharing nudes and sexually explicit pictures and videos of themselves with others, is normal, almost a rite of passage, right? And so there are a lot of issues with that, which you just spoke to. But one of the others is that content can find its way onto the internet. That often happens. And then that picture of that child can be used to bully, to sextort, can get in the hands of a trafficker or a sexual predator and cause further damage and further harm. So there's this continual cycle of abuse, isn't there?
Definitely. And we're seeing, I'm a pretty close follower of the news. There isn't a week that goes by, but there isn't a headline of some sort of a tragedy in this space of a child that's been groomed or was playing video games and thought they were interacting with a fellow peer when in fact it was a pervert or a predator adult that they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to wake up and take action.
Right. There's a lot of good news, everybody. So I don't want you to go, oh my God, this is such a downer. All right. But I do want to make a point here before we go into sexual predators and grooming real quick. And that is there is a real disorder called compulsive sexual disorder. I'd like you to speak to that for just a quick minute because we have heard so much from the other side, the free speech people, the pornographers and everything, that this is just harmless fun. Whatever I do in my bedroom is my business. Pornographers say we don't want kids on our sites, yet they have no age verification. They know, just like big tobacco, that if they can get kids hooked at an early age, they're likely to have an ongoing consumer for life. Why? Because it is addictive, right, Jill?
It is, yes. And this is a disorder characterized by a persistent pattern of failure to control intense repetitive sexual impulses or urges, resulting in repetitive sexual behavior. This is a prevalent, growing issue. And some people believe this is just an issue with men. It is not. With 7% of adult
Mm-mm.
females, 18 and up, and we will likely see that rise. We're seeing more and more females come into treatment for compulsive sexual behavior disorder because more and more porn is being tailored and directed to them. And this is being more and more normalized.
Right.
Yeah, it's a pervasive issue. The second point that's been entered into the ICD-11 that I wanted to speak to is also gaming disorder. That is now a codified, legitimate issue that, similarly to compulsive sexual behavior disorder, is a persistent failure to be able to control one's gaming activity, and it interferes with life
Right.
tasks and health. With that, we see the length of time that needs to go on is typically 12 months or more for that to be in the realm of diagnosing this, but 6 months for compulsive sexual behavior. So these are real issues that many people sadly still dismiss or just think, oh, that's just an excuse for
Mm-hmm.
bad behavior, or that's just an attempt to pathologize something that's normal and
Mm-hmm.
fun. It's not. As a clinician, I'm a direct witness to people every day that I go to work that this has really been a major handicap in their life, has ruined relationships, lost jobs, on and on the list goes. So it's real.
Yes, and I'm so glad you brought up females because girls, young girls, preteen girls, and younger are getting exposed to this content. Why? Because it's out there. And we just have to realize that what's the purpose of pornography? The purpose is to arouse. That's what it's designed to do. And young girls are sexual creatures just like young guys. So, moms and dads, grandparents, please don't think that this is just something to be concerned about your son, your grandson being exposed to this. This is your granddaughter. This is your daughter. And if they're not getting exposed online, once they start interacting with boys and even other girls, they're likely going to be exposed to this content through one of their peers or somebody that they're dating. So there's a lot there that we're going to talk about when we get to the prevention section, but we want to hop real quick over to sexual predators, online traffickers. We know that where kids play, predators prey. And where are kids playing? They are online. We know that, right? So it is no surprise that sexual predators and traffickers are going to be seeking out vulnerable kids on online platforms, on gaming platforms, through chat rooms to hook them, to build relationships with them, and to groom them. And grooming is a very planned way that sexual predators will lure a child into a relationship. They often will just start with looking for kids and starting to find common interests before they ever introduce sex or sexual content and that kind of thing. And by the time they get them a little further along, they may have them hooked. I interviewed a sexual predator who's a convicted sex offender, and we shared the John Doe story. And he said that he could be anybody online.
Many people get online looking for a specific age, specific gender, specific type that they're looking for. And if it's I would prefer to talk to them as myself, as an adult talking to a child, but just in a more peer relationship. If it was someone who I was interested in talking to by their conversation and they were looking for a specific type of individual, then I would be that individual. I would claim myself to be that age or that sex or that type of person.
So Jill, I'm going to throw out a few statistics here. Sextortion increased 265% from 2018 to 2021. Now, this is, of course, during COVID. We know that 40% of kids are talking to strangers online, grades 4th through 8th grade. Child pornography, which has now been retermed child sex abuse images. In 2021, there were more than 29 million reports of child sexual content online. That represents 84.9 million images and videos of kids being sexually exploited. 78% of those children are under the age of 12, 63% under the age of 8. So Jill, this should alarm everyone.
It is alarming. And yet there's this horrible paradox going on where we're arming kids with these devices in the name of safety, but directly putting them in harm's way for very serious harm. These harms are not acceptable. We are failing kids by these harms that are so pervasive, and we're not acting quickly enough or fast enough.
I often ask audiences, do you think that a pedophile or a sexual predator, that when they're viewing this content, that satisfies them? Or do you think it's fueling them to act out more against more and more children? And I often get this kind of blank look. Well, the answer is we know it actually fuels them to act out against more and more children. And also there are predator and pedophile rings online all over the world. And sometimes the price of entry, in fact, often the price of entry is, in order to get in, to get another pedophile's hundreds and hundreds of images of new child sex abuse images, you have to create and produce your own in order to buy your way into the club. So what's happening is this snowball effect of more and more children getting sexually abused. And predators use these technologies to groom these kids, and with the goal of getting them to share sexual experiences, sexual videos, sexual pictures, and then also to get them into an offline sexual encounter. And so the abuse just continues on and on and on. So, Jill, why are kids so vulnerable to grooming? Let's just talk about where they are in their development as human beings and what makes them so susceptible to successful grooming by a trafficker or a predator.
They're vulnerable because they're young. They don't have the experience and brain development to be able to discern and have risk attenuation fully developed. They're innocent, they're gullible. They're supposed to be because they're young. They haven't grown enough yet and had enough life experience and teaching yet to be able to discern. In all fairness to our youth, it's not clear for a lot of adults. And I want to build off something that you just said, Donna. Yes, we have pedophile rings and the darkest underbellies of humanity are online, without a doubt. But pornography has become so baked into this hypersexualized culture that the youth themselves are producing and distributing this faster than any pedophile ring. When young people
Yes.
are snapping shots of themselves and sending this and receiving this, it's porn. And that is rampant. And I'm not hearing word on the street of many cases or parents that are taking this to court or charging these behaviors. Our system's overwhelmed. Like it's like bagging smoke. Where do you start with this? This is happening so pervasively. So, yes, we do have those dark areas of the web where horrible, evil, bad actors are hanging out and doing terrible things. But I want to bring this back to what's more common day to day for most families is their young person is receiving or perhaps exchanging and sharing nudes and pictures and sexting, which is sexual harassment, indecent exposure, and production and distribution of pornographic images. So I want to bring this down to kind of the more day-to-day level, and it is alarming.
Absolutely. And when those images get in the hands of a predator or a trafficker or somebody who wants to sextort that child, we hear story after story of these kids having someone get a picture from them and having that person not be who they say they are, then threatening to put that image online unless they pay them money. In fact, there was a story not too long ago of a member of Congress in South Carolina, where I am right now, whose son this happened to, was sextorted, or the attempt to be sextorted, within just a few hours of this happening, and he took his own life. So these are very real issues. So let's get to prevention. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We've heard it our whole life. We know this. Here's the good news that parents, you're the first line of defense. We know you're overwhelmed. This is a lot. If you have 2 kids with 3 devices each, that's 6 devices to manage. That's already a lot if you're feeling overwhelmed. But we want you to know that you're not alone. There are so many resources to help you, and we're going to just walk you through some baseline prevention information to help you recognize warning signs with your kids, how to prevent all of these issues and dangers that we've been talking about, and to help your kids navigate this digital world in a safe way in order to protect their innocence and their dignity, because that's what we're there for as parents. So, Jill, you've got 2 young girls, right?
I do.
We used to think of parenting as just parenting, but our kids are living in this online world. So we have to think in terms of parenting that extends to the online world. So there's digital parenting and parenting, or really, isn't it just all parenting, Jill?
It is. This is the reality that parents are navigating. And as I mentioned earlier, we know the majority of parents are concerned about these risks. Most have some awareness of these risks, but the minority of parents are putting it into action. And this is a vitally important arena of parenting, attention and action. It needs to happen, and for our kids to grow up in a healthy way.
That's right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the practical tips as well as the technological tools. And in Enough is Enough, we just termed this rules and tools, safety rules and software tools. And when you hear that, you might think as a parent, well, this is something that I need to give to my child. It's like, no, these are safety rules and software tools for you, the parent, because you're the first line of defense. You do not have to understand internet technology to do any of the things we're going to talk about right this minute. And that is, first of all, keep the lines of communication open with your kids. You want to be that safe person that your child comes to if they come across a problem. And one of the things that I see in all the years I've been doing this, 30 years now, is a lot of times kids will not come to their parents with anything that might be alarming to their parents because they're afraid that their parent's going to overreact, they're going to shame them, and they're going to take the technology away. So as you build this atmosphere of trust, it's really, really important so that your child can feel like they can safely come to you. You can have a conversation. You're going to listen and not overreact. So let's talk about keeping these lines of communication open. Jill, you and I were just talking about this the other day, and I said to you, and I say to parents all the time, I said, if when your child is online, when they come home from school, you ask them, do you have any homework? How was school today? What's going on? If they're online, you say, who were you talking to? Did you meet anybody new? Have you shared anything? What did you share? You're playing a game. Did you go to a different level? Well, who was involved? Did somebody new start playing the game? Have conversations with them about what they're doing online on a regular basis. So this is just a normal part of the flow of your parenting. Jill.
Yes, and it's adding those layers, small layers, driving to school, walking, here or there, just at the dinner table, small layers that often come up very organically. I find as a parent myself, I need to model all of this first and foremost. When I'm at home, my work phone is off. When I'm in the car, I'm with my kids. When we're having dinner, there's no devices on. Maybe there's music in the background, but there's no devices on because you have to create the scenarios first where open dialogue can occur. Then I really do make a point of sharing things that are coming up for me. There may have been an uncomfortable email or a text message, or I saw something online, even with the best protections in place. These are not perfect. So I really ask, but I also share so that my kids know I'm in this boat too. I'm navigating this digital world as well. And we're going to get it right sometimes, and we're going to mess up and be exposed to stuff we wish we hadn't seen or heard. And so I really try to de-shame this by letting my kids know when I'm maybe struggling with how do I respond to that, or what are my options with that situation that have come up. That really paves a lot of good space and opening for kids to talk. But I loved what you said, Donna, to not assume that kids are going to come forward. Most often they don't. Some kids will, but I think that's more rare. I think to be very deliberate and direct, asking specific questions, sharing specific things, and creating those spaces in our day-to-day lives where those things can even happen.
What I have found is that kids often do want to talk about what's going on. They just want a safe space. They want to know that they're not going to be judged. I interviewed a lot of kids about pornography use when they were preteens and teenagers, and they just said, I wish I could have gone to my mom and dad, but I was afraid that they were going to shame me because I was already so ashamed. And so what I found, even in that conversation with pornography or sexual predators, or maybe they've shared a nude and they're concerned that the boy that they shared it with is going to break up with them. It's going to end up all over the school and that kind of thing. What I found, sometimes you can get them to open up by asking questions like, not necessarily have you ever seen pornography, even though you may be able to say that to one of your children, depending on the child, but you can always say, are any of your friends seeing this content or try to share it with you? Or do you know anybody that's talking to somebody that you think might be dangerous? And start to engage these conversations this way. And you will find they will really start to open up. At least this is what I found. And so, Jill, can you speak to that? I know you've talked about with your own kids, but do you have some ideas of conversation starters?
Sure. One additional one that I really love and that I use a lot in my own life is I'll build off of something in the news. And, I've never been much of a celebrity watcher, but since I've been parenting teens, I will purposely kind of follow what's going on with celebrities, people that the kids are really following. And I'll build off a story. Hey, I heard
Mm-hmm.
this, or this, there was this feud going on, or this text was sent and it's now in the news. What do you think about this? Or, whether it's a story about revenge porn, what is that? Why do you think that occurs? Or what's your thought? How would you handle that if you were that person or that person? So try to bring real life examples in.
Mm-hmm.
I find that really helpful.
That's right. And we certainly found this out during COVID, right? The incidences of depression, anxiety, and everything else just skyrocketed with these kids being locked down. They couldn't go outside. They weren't socializing and everything else. And that should be just a life lesson for all of us. We're now out of that era. Get your kids outside. Get them in offline play and offline conversation and turning the devices off and engaging in real world offline communications. This is so important. I want to get to the parental control tools because there are wonderful ways you can set time limits on all these devices, which I highly, highly recommend. But I want to just stay in the practical tips for a minute. Our recommendation in the safety rules part of rules and tools, and we're going to put it up on the screen where you can go and you can download this and put it up on your refrigerator if you need to as a parent. So you can just check yourself, am I doing all these things with all the devices that my kids are using? But one is, if you're going to let them on a certain platform, go to that platform yourself. If you're going to let them use a game, go to the game, research the game, look at the pros and the cons before you make a decision to say yes. Then, if you do make the decision to say yes, commit to be an online parent for that game, for that device. That means that if you open that platform, then you need to be parenting. Well, I recommend that you parent that child on that platform. So that really helps you think back, okay, is this a yes, or is this a no, or is this a later? So the same thing with a device, a smartphone. I say to parents, smartphones can be great after a certain age. I like the wait to eighth idea if that works for you and your family. But if you're going to introduce a smartphone, then be ready to manage that device. So each device, each platform, research, decide if it's right for that child, and then be willing to get in and manage that. So we're going to go right to the parental control tools. And that might sound, oh gosh, that's so hard. I don't know how to do all of this. And it is a little tricky. We've got a lot of information and enough is enough. But basically, what parental control tools are technology. Technology that will allow you as the parent to limit what your kids are able to do and to see and where to go online. So we're going to talk about filtering first. This to me is one of the top tools that you need to turn on. So what a filter does is it will actually filter the content that is able to come in through email, through a search, or through any type of online interaction, and filter different types of content. So you can filter pornography, you can filter hate speech, you can filter race speech, you can filter bomb making, you can filter lingerie. There's like 20 to 30 categories that you can filter. You might say, oh my God, that sounds so overwhelming. But a lot of these filtering companies have made it very easy to just check. Do you want mature teen, young teen, or you just want everything filtered? At the most restrictive level. So filters are really important, and they're actually very good. Jill, do you want to speak to this and and what you're seeing in your home and what's worked for you and what hasn't?
Sure, just to reinforce what you're presenting, Donna, which I agree with completely. Uh, in my own home, we delay. I don't have children on social media platforms. I have a 15-year-old and almost 12-year-old. We don't have social media platforms, but that doesn't mean they don't get exposed to social media content. So we have a filter, we have monitors, and at night I have Microsoft Safety set up where internet turns off at 9 o'clock at night. And maybe there's some exceptions with homework once in a while if a project is running late, but from 9 o'clock till 7 a.m., there's no internet on those devices even available. Phones and devices are charged upstairs in a central location. There's no devices in bedrooms. They're only allowed to be used in the study or in common areas. And I not only use filters, but I also want parents to know that there's many free ways of starting the filtering
Mm-hmm.
process through the platforms themselves. For example, Google has safe search or YouTube
Yep.
has restricted mode. So I make a point on each of their devices to go through and make sure that Google, YouTube, whatever it is that they're using or needing for school, let's say, that I have that with the free protections in place as much as possible. And then on top of that, because it's a layered approach, so I use whatever the platforms
Mm-hmm.
have already, um, the filters, the monitoring, and then combined with that, family discussions where we talk about what we
Mm-hmm.
avoid online and why, and also what we seek out. What are we expecting of one another? And we make it really clear in our home that there's no double standard. Mom and dad don't get to look at stuff that kids aren't allowed to look at. If that's not good for them, it's likely most cases not good for us either. So
Mm-hmm.
really making this a team effort,
Mm-hmm.
layered discussions. I also want to add the importance of discussions about healthy sexuality. What kids are faced with online is very addictive, hypersexualized, objectifying, often abusive or violent and even criminal images of sexuality. And
Mm-hmm.
so we've got to counterbalance that by having open discussions about what does it
Mm-hmm.
mean to love someone? What does it mean to be a good friend? How do we protect our body and show respect for our bodies and others' bodies? And those are just layers. And
Mm-hmm.
so for anyone out there that may be thinking, I am stressed and tired and overwhelmed, I don't know where to start with this, what I say is start, even if it's small. Every bit of it helps. And
Mm-hmm.
also, internet safety is not something we need to tack on to parenting. It's part of parenting in today's world.
Mm-hmm.
And the lessons we teach as parents in our homes about how we behave online, that's good life skills, right? This isn't just its own bucket of stuff that, oh, I'm going to add that to my parenting arsenal or not. This is when we're tackling internet safety, we're tackling many of the key points of parenting generally: health, good modeling, expectations, manners, all of those things that we're wanting our kids to
Mm-hmm.
acquire. So this is something that I try my best to infuse into all aspects of my parenting. Um, and Don, I want to say for anyone out there, well, oh, Jill works in this space. We have our mess ups in this household as well. And so I want to validate, I know firsthand how hard this is, and it feels like whack-a-mole. It's just like every day, and there's something new coming at us all the time. And I am not super tech
Mm-hmm.
savvy. And just 2 weeks ago, I said to my husband, I am reserving all of Saturday afternoon and evening to do updates, security updates, and refresh and improve our filters. And I got everything installed. And I'm slow at it. I have to go on tech support and I'm on chat support, and it's a pain. And I wouldn't have any other way because I know how important it is. But having those layers, those discussions, using the tools, having the rules, making them clear, and having mom and dad model all of that, it is a winning combination.
We're going to talk a little bit just about the free tools that are available. So, say for instance, you've got a child using a gaming platform or a gaming device. Those gaming devices have these tools we're talking about. So, you want to turn on the filters, you want to turn on the monitoring. I suggest, depending on the age of the child, that you only let them play with what I call an approved gamer list. So you choose who they're playing with. They're not just playing with anybody anywhere in the world who could be a good person or a dangerous person. So you limit that, and then you decide at what age you think your child or your teenager might be able and mature enough to play with someone outside of who that parent approved buddy list. The same thing on social media. We've been working with social media companies to develop more visible parental control tools that you can actually find. Now, enough is enough. We're trying to get them to completely have the defaults turned on so that when your child goes on, first of all, they can't get on unless they're old enough, number one, with age verification. But then those tools are automatically defaulted on. This has been a long, hard battle. We're making some progress. We've got a lot further to go on that. But these tools are often available. Same thing with your smartphone. Check if you're using Verizon, you're using Apple, you're using Google, see what free controls they have on and get them turned on. Usually they're pretty good. They could be a little wonky. You never know. If you have to layer that with a paid technology, then you can do so. And we've got a lot of lists of those at internetsafety101.org. First of all, let's talk a little bit about red flags real quick on any of these things. And when you think a parent should consider seeking out professional help, let's just say if they know that their child's engaging with an adult online and it could really go south really fast, it already has, or they're starting to have a pornography problem or suicidal, cyberbullying. What are the red flags and when do they seek out professional help?
Thank you, Donna. That's, when to seek help when there's something really going on. I struggle with that question because I used to many years ago work with teens clinically, and I'm now a parent of teens. That's tough because when you look up, and we know that many of the red flags are sudden changes in behavior, sudden changes in mood, spending more time alone, spending more time online or avoiding their device. If someone's being cyberbullied, you'll often see them avoiding their device and you're like, what's going on? Right? And so, but the challenge is the reason why I wrestle with this question and answer is those red flags sometimes indicate kind of normal stuff we see in adolescence, changes in mood, changes in behaviors. Well, that goes with the territory. So I think I really would want to bolster the expertise of each parent who knows their child best and to, trust your gut. And if something's feeling uneasy or just different, check in, ask. So I think trusting our guts as parents is really, really key. And making sure that we have an internet safety plan, that we're not just trusting, oh, they're kids and online's fine. We know from research there's a disconnect between what parents think is going on online or what they think a child's seeing online versus what's actually occurring. Some research has pointed a 25-year gap. That's pretty huge. That's like a century in the technology world. So being aware, trusting your gut as parent to notice any significant change. That can include changes in school performance, health. But again, I wrestle with this because some of that goes with the territory with what we see with normal, healthy teens.
Well, Jill, thank you. I mean, I just will say to our audience, Jill is one of my favorite people. I just, I miss you. I miss you being on our board, but I know that our friendship has been around for, 25 years and will go on for a long time. And you're just one of the most delightful people I know. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Donna, and thank you. You've been a champion and a leader in this space for decades, and I know a little bit about what goes into that and the sacrifices and the heat you take. And so, thank you.
Thanks, Jill.